Now the 3 Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the 3 Martini Lunch, along with Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Good, bad, and crazy martinis for you as usual. We start with the good, and Jim, this one's a little cynical, but hey, we need that once in a while. Yesterday, of course, was opening day in Major League Baseball. There was a series, a couple games a couple of weeks ago, actually, that started the season in Australia. There was a Sunday night game, but the first Monday of the season is really opening day. And in New York City, the Mets hosted their home opener against our own Washington Nationals. The brand new mayor of New York City, Bill De Blasio, threw out the first pitch, and let's just say he was not warmly received. Most first-pitch politicians are not warmly received in New York City, but this was especially fun. This is from the New York Daily News.
Your attention to the pitcher's mound for today's very special ceremonial first pitch. Accompanied by boys and girls from the East Harlem Tutorial Program. I didn't recognize it. New York City, Bill De Blasio.
Wouldn't really be New York City without the bleep. Jim, that's pretty unanimous. I mean, that's pretty much about the same vote total he got a few months ago, so he's clearly got the city on his side.
Well, actually, no, the vote total he got was fairly high. His poll numbers since then have dropped pretty steeply. It may have been because shortly after his election, he decided that the two biggest problems in the city were the horse-drawn carriages in Central Park and charter schools. Not crime, not economy, not, job creation, nothing like that. I can hear listeners right now saying, come on, Greg and Jim, you guys are being unfair. That's a crowd full of Mets fans. They're full of negativity. They're full of bitterness and disappointment. They're just inclined to boo everything. They, the fact that they just saw a guy with a Mets cap on, and they just assumed he was something to boo. Which is there's a certain amount of evidence to support that theory. But on the one hand, we could feel a certain amount of vindication and a good sense that, at least the crowd at at Citi Field, I'm showing my age there. Mets fans recognize that their mayor's doing a lousy job and seems obsessed with things that we don't really even consider to be problems and ignoring real problems of New York City. But there's a little bit of wanting to grab those Mets fans and kind of shake them a little bit and say, guys, he's not a completely different person than he was on the campaign trail. The fact that this guy was a, progressive through and through, totally in the pocket of the teachers' unions and nowhere near renouncing the kind of nanny state mentality of Mayor Blue. None of this stuff is a really big surprise here. So the question is, what exactly did you guys expect from this? The only good news is it looks like they're starting to realize, that you don't want to elect a, guy who's completely in the pocket of the teachers' unions and who loathes charter schools with a passion and wants to raise taxes and stuff like that. Then when you do that, there are negative consequences, and hopefully New Yorkers will kind of take a certain lesson from this.
Well, and he's big on income inequality, and most of the people who probably had the seats closest to the field probably don't.
Opening day, yeah, good point. So
probably
that's also not his crowd.
The other thing, and we can't really show this because this is audio and it's on the video. What is it with the way Democrats raise their kids that they don't know how to throw a baseball? I mean, you see President Obama's opening pitches early in his administration. De Blasio's form was a little bit better. He at least knew you had to put your opposite foot forward before you throw, but his form was just pitiful. Maybe it's painting with a broad brush here, but man, people, teach your kids how to throw.
When they do the first flip and tiddlywinks, he's going to absolutely nail it. I'll give you that.
All right, on to Martini number 2 now, and with April comes budget season. We saw the president's late budget a couple of weeks ago. Now it's time for Congress to do its thing. Of course, the Senate probably won't, but that hasn't stopped Senator Harry Reid from already declaring his opinion on the Paul Ryan budget just minutes after it was released, so I'm sure he actually poured through all the details. Harry Reid's tweet at 10:10 a.m. Tuesday morning. The budget proposals drafted by House Budget Chairman Paul Ryan have been a blueprint for a modern Kochtopia. It's the Koch budget. Man, Jim, they're throwing all their eggs into this basket. And I guess whenever you mention the Kochs, the Democratic wallet's open. But for those who aren't paying attention, this really seems like a weak strategy.
Here's the silver lining on this bad martini, Greg, is that 1 month from now, Harry will insist he's never used the phrase in light of his denial that he had ever said anything about Republican lies about Obamacare and stuff like that. No, I mean, one of the things that's fascinating about this is that you and I and our listeners and my readers and almost anybody who follows politics closely can see the strings, can see what they're doing here. Democrats, the economy is not looking good. Obamacare is deeply unpopular. Beyond our shores, Russia is on the march. So there's bad news on a whole bunch of fronts. So they need some other issue. And they're beating the drum on the minimum wage. Obama's running around giving another speech on that today. But most people realize that a minimum wage hike doesn't help them that much. So, it's something that people generally support in polls, but it's not something they're going to come out to the polls for. So they need an enemy. They need a villain. And Mitch McConnell and John Boehner aren't doing it for them. It just isn't something that gets the average Democrat marching to the polls and really enthusiastic to vote for the likes of Kay Hagan or Leggett Shore or Mark Pryor or something like that. So they need a monster, and the Koch brothers have become the monster of the left. And Harry Reid has just totally embraced this over the top. The Koch brothers were helping Russia invade Ukraine, and Koch brothers don't want people to have health insurance. It's just over the top to the point where we can all see what this is a very 1984-ish Emmanuel Goldstein, demonization campaign. And you almost wonder how many Democrats really believe it, but they're doing it because I guess the idea is if they affect enough, low information voters, guys who don't pay enough attention to this, they can persuade them that the Koch brothers are the root of all evil and the most important issue in this year's midterm should be stopping these guys. It's cynical and it's sad and it's rather ridiculous. I don't know whether it's a sign of it must be working because they keep doing it or they keep doing it because they have no better option. So even though it's heavily mocked and heavily ridiculed and just seems so over the top as to be silly and to now say, they're trying to build Kochtopia. Remember on the floor of the Senate, he said they were coke addicts and just, it's kind of ridiculous, but they're sticking with it, suggesting that either they're totally convinced it's going to work at some point and they really can make the midterm elections all about these two brothers who, give to arts foundations and educations and universities and groups like that. Or they just have nothing else, and this is their kind of Hail Mary pass to change the midterm dynamic.
Jim, we joked a week or so ago about the fact that the Koch brothers will eventually be blamed for the missing Malaysian flight. But how desperate do you think this will get? Are they going to get blamed for, the Kennedy assassination or Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance or something else along the way?
I'm sure somewhere in some, maybe Center for American Progress or some liberal PAC right now, they're sitting there thinking like, American Majority PAC. They're sitting thinking, could we blame the Koch brothers for Obamacare? Totally inverse loop and get the red state Democrats to pose as the Obamacare critics and just totally switch positions and hope that nobody notices and see what happens.
That's probably actually a better strategy. All right, speaking of Obamacare, as we know, the president and most members of his administration have been engaged in a soft media tour. We just didn't realize how soft until yesterday because it's not just soft when it comes to policy, which we'll also talk about in just a second. It also comes to the softness of the vice president's skin. He was on Rachel Ray yesterday pitching the last-minute signups for the Obamacare enrollment.
And I was going to ask you a question, but I got a little nervous because it's a little personal. I have to ask you, though, you have the most glowing, perfect skin of any person I've ever seen. I really want to know what moisturizer you use. I love moisturizers. My husband is a moisturizer as well. Would you tell me what moisturizer you use?
This is not an April Fool's joke, but eventually the conversation did turn to Obamacare, and then she lobbed these hard-hitting questions at the vice president.
Talk about healthcare.gov because today is the deadline, right? So really the important thing is to get online today and get yourself in that queue.
There you go, Jim.
So you don't have to, it's not the sign-up day. It's the, deadline day. It's the get online deadline day.
Yes.
You summarized it well, Greg. I mean, I did a April Fool's Day joke in the Morning Jolt today, so I wasn't sure if we should do it with this program. Her raving about Joe Biden's skin, you can't make up a joke or something wild or like this. I'm almost got nothing, Greg. There's just we've now reached the point where reality is beyond parody. Life imitates the Onion. I think if the Onion had been sitting around with a pitch meeting and they said, okay, how about Joe Biden goes on Rachel Ray's show and she just falls in love with his skin and tells them that he has the greatest skin of all time, and she wants to moisturize it, and then people would say, nah, that's all right. Maybe some sort of like barbecue dry rub. She wants to rub it into him or something like that. It's like, no. That's just weird and surreal, and so I'm going to try to, salvage our bizarre third martini and just make an observation that when you become a prominent Democrat, people in the media world feel the need to tell you that you're terrific at whatever you do. Any advice you give is fantastic, and everything you do. So there was a couple of years where the spoken word Grammys went to Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Barack Obama, and Jimmy Carter in 4 straight years, beating out comedians, beating out Maya Angelou, beating out David Sedaris, all kind. And so I was looking at really Grammys, the very best spoken word performances of that 4-year period just happened to be 4 prominent Democratic politicians. Really, and probably the most egregious and a great example of this is two great examples. I mean, Barack Obama getting mentioned the 50 healthiest men in America by Men's Fitness magazine while smoking, mind you. And then the most recent one that I really seemed to stick in a lot of people's craw was that, Greg, I don't know how familiar you are with South by Southwest, the big music and technology festival. Do you see who the keynote speaker was this year?
Was it Chelsea?
It was Chelsea Clinton. After astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. Okay. He was her opening act, really. So the guy who's hosting the Cosmos series and knows how to explain supernovas and, all of that is not she's just kind of a warm-up act so she could talk about what the Clinton Foundation does. Now, there were a bunch of, hipsters and folks who actually go to South by Southwest and say, look, we go here for music. Past speakers have been prominent Silicon Valley guys, Elon Musk, real big names, and then we get Chelsea Clinton. So in this example, Joe Biden's on the show, and Rachel Ray feels the need to say something swell about him and how great he is. The skin is what she came up with. That's what she got. It's not, Mr. Vice President, I love your plan to divide Iraq into 3 countries. I loved how you advised President Obama not to authorize the bin Laden raid. There just wasn't much for her to work with. So she goes with skin, and there we are.
Jim, have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us. Join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.